When it came to Medina, Muhammad expelled one tribe of Jews. He let them take their stuff with them. Second tribe of Jews, he expelled them and took their stuff. And the third tribe of Jews, he single-handedly beheaded all the men, any boy who had reached puberty, and took the women and children and sold them into slavery. But then there's just some plain ugly stuff as well. Muhammad was 49 years old when he married Aisha, who was 6. He had to convince her father to let him marry her because this was something that God wanted them to do. He did not consummate that relationship till she was at the age of 9, however. But still, 52 years old, consummating a relationship with a 9-year-old girl. Because of that today, girls around the world are forced into early marriage that their bodies simply cannot bear. And many girls around the world are dying because they're giving birth before they've even completed puberty because their parents said, if Muhammad did it, it's okay for us to do it. If you want to read a book about that, there's a girl who wrote a book. She said, the name of the book is I Am Najud, age 10 and divorced. I Am Najud, age 10 and divorced. You can buy that off Amazon. Powerful book. It's a story of how she escaped from her domineering, violent husband and demanded a divorce from the courts as a 10-year-old. Powerful book. All that happened because Muhammad set the example. Don't forget, he was the exemplar. But this is what really got me. When I was a Muslim, I took all that stuff and I explained it away. Oh, he killed the Jews because they were treasonous. He married the girl because it was socially acceptable to marry a 6-year-old girl at that time. It's fine for the culture. But this I could not explain away. The Quran declares that it is appropriate to have sexual intercourse with female captives. Where do we see this? Here's one place, chapter 23, verses 1 through 6. Good Muslims are those who abstain from sex, except with those joined to them in the marriage bond, or captives whom their right hands possess. So abstain from sex, except from your wives and those whom your right hands possess. Well, who are they? What do the hadith say? This is Sahih al-Muslim. Remember, Sahih al-Muslim for Sunni Muslims is as good as gold. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri reported at the Battle of Hunayn, Allah's messenger sent an army to Autas, and having encountered the enemy, he fought with them. Having overcome them and taken them captives, the companions of Allah's messenger seemed to refrain from having intercourse with captive women because their husbands were polytheists. Then Allah Most High sent down a message regarding that, and women already married except those whom your right hands possess. In other words, they had just captured women on the battlefield, and the men wanted to have intercourse with them right away. By the way, another hadith tells us that their husbands were still alive. They hadn't been killed. And Muhammad allowed them to have intercourse with these women on the battlefield, and later allowed them to be sold into slavery. Some of them were pregnant and sold into slavery. And this is allowed by the Quran? See, to me, this was absolutely unconscionable. Even as a Muslim, I looked at this and I said, there's got to be a way around this. And when I was going to mosque to ask these questions, this was the biggest one for me. How is it possible that God would allow this? And never did I get a satisfactory response. So you've got the good and the bad and the ugly there. So the conclusion is, the sources for the historical Muhammad are of dubious reliability. You just cannot be sure of them. You just can't know that much about Muhammad's life because of how poor the sources are. But if they are trusted, as Muslims do trust them, then the picture of Muhammad is not flattering. And if they are not trusted, then there is no reason to accept him as a prophet. Do you see that? Does everyone follow the apologetic here? So if a Muslim says Muhammad is a prophet of God, you ask, how do you know that? Well, look at how wonderful he was. Well, the sources also say this. That's a problem. And if you're not going to trust the sources, you have nothing to go on to say that he was a prophet of God. So that's Muhammad. Remember I said Muhammad in the Quran. Now we're going to talk about the Quran. And we're going through this at a fast rate. We're not going to be able to discuss everything the way I would like. But we'll touch on most of this. The first thing I want to mention is that when you think about the Bible, you think about the New Testament, you got the 27 books of the New Testament. Right, the Gospels were written in a society where people knew how to read and things were written constantly as far as records. You had a lot of that going on. But in Islam, when the Quran was being composed, you did not have a developed Arabic script. There was no book in Arabic before the Quran. The Quran is the first Arabic book. The script of the Quran was developing as people were demanding the Quran to be written. What do I mean by that? These are some of the earliest scripts of the Quran. This is some Kufic, and this is some Hijazi script. If you compare this to the modern Quran, they look nothing alike. Most Muslims today can't even read this, even if they can read modern Arabic. They can't read this because there's a lot of things missing from this. A lot of vowels are missing. A lot of breathing marks are missing. You don't know how to pronounce this. The reason why is because at that time, people had not developed an Arabic script to the point where it could carry the weight of the text. And so you're asking me, Nabeel, how is it that the Quran was composed when they didn't even have writing? The answer is it was composed orally. Remember, Muhammad did not know how to read or write, and so he dictated the Quran to scribes. And scribes wrote notes like this. And the key word there is notes. These are memory aids. The Quranic text was still the oral text, and the memory aids were used to remind people of that oral text.